Oi, do you have a license to help blind people summon a cab, love? I don't know how to say that in California accent, but that's what the California Consumer Protection and Enforcement Division told to a business that dared to include blind people in the market. But it could be worse. You could be a 6-year-old boy with a violent, murderous mother with a huge history of violence and only be narrowly saved right before she kills you. Because the state, despite evidence, decided that you still belong with your hateful, violent mother rather than your non-hateful and non-murderous father. A very good lesson on how state-enforced misandry works in reality, despite what you're being told in the school or in the gynocentric media. But don't worry, there is still an acceptable way to be male. Just insist really hard that you're a woman, and then sue other men if they refuse to believe you. But you better insist while you're still young, like 12 or 13. Adults will bend over backwards to believe you. In fact, adults have become increasingly fond of bending over backwards to believing anything from children, really, as a 13-year-old girl found out the hard way when she found herself arrested for gun violence, even though she never touched a weapon in her life. Even so, there are limits though. The limits are also coming from a mental asylum, such as educators deciding to ban dating for 10-year-olds. I wish I were joking. But while dating at the age of 10 may be haram in schools, masturbation isn't. In fact, it's being taught since the age of 6 in some British counties, and soon enough mandatory for the whole country. Oh, and by the way, don't you dare mention that the whole Greta Thunberg thingy is a cult. Sure, it gets its own huge moral for the plebs to pray at it, but it's not a cult. They say so, therefore it must be true. These are our stories on Periodic Insanity. Hello everyone and welcome to the 30th installment of Periodic Insanity. Alrighty, let's continue to roll through the long queue of insanity left uncovered over the last several months. So, let's go with some economic insanity. Reason Magazine. California tried to fine a company $10,000 for ordering blind people Ubers and Lyfts without a permit. Go grandparent gives people without smartphones a way to use rideshare services. Regulators think that's a problem. California regulators are trying to crack down on a company that orders Ubers for the blind and the elderly. In February, the Consumer Protection and Enforcement Division of the California Public Utilities Commission, the state body that regulates transportation network companies like Uber and Lyft, issued a citation to Go Grandparent for operating a for-hire transportation service without permission. Regulators demanded that the company pay a $10,000 fine and obtain a necessary permit to run a transportation network company, which would involve getting $1 million liability insurance for its vehicles and handing over lists of its drivers to the state. But Go doesn't own any vehicles and it doesn't contract directly with any drivers. Instead, for the past 4 years, the company has been providing a toll-free hotline that customers without a smartphone can call in order to order a Uber or Lyft ride to their home or another pre-arranged location. Using customer-provided information, Go's software automatically orders a ride, then charges a 27 cent per mile fee for its services. Go's service is aimed at elderly and disabled people who either don't have or can't use smartphones. Its novelty and perceived public benefit, improving mobility for seniors, has earned the company coverage from such outlets such as the New York Times and TechCrunch. State regulators have taken a more negative view. California law defines a for-hire ride service, referred to as charter party carriers, as any person engaged in the transportation of persons by motor vehicle for compensation. CPED argues that this applies to GoGo. In regulatory filings, it has used the Merriam-Webster definition of engaged as involved in the activity. The division officially cited GoGo in February. In March, the company filed an appeal, arguing that the regulations it was being asked to comply with were inapplicable to its business model. GoGo allows a flip phone to act as a substitute for a smartphone for the rider summoning a ride through a transportation network company such as Uber or Lyft, says the appeal, which notes that the company neither employs nor contracts with drivers. For the Public Utilities Commission to regulate them would be equivalent to regulating a smartphone or the Google Alexa device or a computer code. In an August opinion, an administrative law judge agreed with GoGo, noting that the CPED had used a more narrow definition of transportation service in the past, and that if regulators' expansive definition of what it meant to be engaged in transporting people were accepted, those same regulators might themselves be labeled for hire transportation service. CPED regulators are engaged in the transportation of persons by motor vehicle by virtue of this enforcement action, and they are compensated for their activity, the judge noted. This absurd result of relying on its dictionary definition demonstrates the ambiguity of the term engaged. The full Utility Commission still needs to vote to ratify this decision, and the vote keeps getting delayed. The 5-member commission was initially supposed to vote to dismiss the citation issued against GoGo in October, but that was moved back to November and now early December. A spokesperson for the California Public Utilities Commission told the San Francisco Chronicle that a few delays are pro forma. Not so, says Thomas McBride, GoGo's attorney, who told the paper that multiple delays usually happen only for major commission businesses, not a minor citation like the one issued against his client. He speculates that CPED staff could be holding up proceedings. Regardless of what's behind these delays, it's ridiculous that GoGo is in the position in the first place. The company is performing a useful and innovative service by helping seniors to make use of technology that might otherwise have left them behind. For their trouble, they've been beset by dictionary quoting regulators who are stretching state law to penalize the company, close quote. Now this is the kind of insanity that drives me mad. Precisely because it basically shows just how terrible the government is when it comes to most of these things, and why it should never be allowed anywhere near these things to begin with. Under the interpretation that this, what do they call themselves again? California Public Utilities Commission. So under the interpretation that this commission is proposing, every single hotel is in trouble. I mean, think about it for a second. Hotels routinely call airport shuttles, taxis, and even arrange limo service for their guests. Under this creative interpretation of the law here, those hotels would need to maintain a minimum of $1 million in insurance on every taxi, limousine, and shuttle bus in operation in the region the hotel is, despite the hotel having no ownership or control of these vehicles. And then keep track of personal information on drivers that don't work for them, and do it all right now, not in the months or years it would actually take. And that assumes all the taxi, shuttle, and limousine companies comply with the hotel's requests, when they're not only under no obligation to do so, but might even get into legal trouble themselves for the data breach necessary in order to comply. This is madness. And this is not even a question of safety, since presumably Uber and Lyft already passed all those regulations. It's merely a question of the state quite literally imposing a burden on those who dare to help people for a profit. How dare you make it so that those who don't want to own a supercomputer with a GPS, otherwise known as a smartphone, can still use a service that, as the market shows, is artificially restricted to smartphones? This particular service does more to help with the mobility of the disabled than all of California's state programs combined in the last 50 years. And instead of being happy that another cohort of highly disadvantaged people are being brought into the market, the government tries to crush those that made it possible. Maybe those government officials should check their privilege? But no, seriously. It's cases like these that make my blood boil and are the reason why I'm very unwilling to discuss compromise on the issue of the size of the government before most of its so-called services are abolished outright. What compromise? With whom, more precisely? There is no way to compromise with people who seriously believe that it's the bureaucrats' job to regulate how disabled people move around. That's just outright insane. Here's another one from the government helps people. Not. This one on an issue where the government should be involved. The son, boy aged 6, screams, "Mom's trying to kill me," as he's stabbed 25 times by his crazed naked mother before cops shoot her dead. This is an insane story. Quote, police were horrified to discover a 6-year-old boy covered in blood and his crazed mom and urging police to kill her after stabbing him 25 times. Cops had arrived at the property in Henderson, Nevada after a troubling call from the 6-year-old in which he can be heard screaming, "Don't hurt me," and "She's trying to kill me." The mom, named in local media as 37-year-old Claudia Nadia Rodriguez, was found by cops completely naked and saying, "They're trying to kill each other, they're making us do it, we got to kill each other." When approached by officers, she reportedly screams, "You got to kill me," and was agitated. A struggle ensued with the two male officers, with shocking body cam footage showing a naked Rodriguez grabbing one of the officers' guns as they both tried to wrestle it off her. According to reports, the 37-year-old managed to shoot the gun once, but no officers were harmed. Rodriguez was shot at the scene, later dying from her injuries at Sunrise Hospital and Medical Center. The youngster was taken to University Medical Center in Las Vegas, where it was discovered he had been stabbed 25 times by his own mom, police say. The Henderson Police Department later released a horrifying photograph of the little boy's blood-stained t-shirt. The department also made public the harrowing 911 recording in which the extremely distressed little boy can be heard screaming and begging his mom not to hurt him. He also tells the operator through sobs, "She's trying to kill me." However, he is reportedly doing well and expected to make a full recovery. Both officers have been placed on paid leave while local police chiefs investigate the fatal shooting, which has been ruled as a homicide. And get this, further investigations after the incident have uncovered the woman had a history of domestic violence and is alleged to have mentally and physically abused 2 of her older children. She had been arrested 4 times in the last 4 years on suspicion of domestic battery and has 1 conviction of the same charge from 2017. According to reports, the child's father had been locked in a fierce custody battle with Rodriguez around the same time and was fighting for sole custody of the boy on the grounds that his mother was abusive. But as of December that year, the couple had joint custody of him, close quote. And this is what happens when you let ideology drive policy instead of letting reason drive policy. This is your government on feminism. Yes, I know, I've said this multiple times, but it's always a good time to remind everyone that under the feminist-inspired Duluth model in the United States, the police, when called for a domestic violence situation, is prohibited from arresting women, even if it is beyond reasonable doubt clear that it is the woman who is the aggressor. And even in the rare cases when women are investigated for domestic violence, they're almost never punished unless they try to kill their children, and sometimes not even then. As it was the case here, this maniac has been under investigation multiple times and was even convicted less than 2 years ago, and that still didn't matter in the family courts, which almost never rule a mother unfit to be a parent, even if that is clear for any reasonable person. And then you see the pricks in the cathedral media wondering why anti-feminist groups continue to grow and have started to make gains on narrative and even on policy. Well, this is why. Because the status quo is insane. It rewards terrible behavior from women and punishes all behaviors from men. This cannot go on. Well, technically it can go on for quite some time, but you don't want to see the end of it. And no, at the end of it is not angry incels on the internet. That's marginal nonsense raised up as a boogeyman to scare you from asking questions. At the end of this systemic insanity like this lies civilizational collapse. And it's not going to be driven by angry incels that you've been taught to fear or deride. Those peeps are unimportant in this conversation. You know who will be important? The younger victims, especially the male victims of this insanity. Yes, like this 6-year-old boy. I mean, think about it. This 6-year-old boy will be a 20-year-old man just 14 short years from now. Just 6 or 7 years from now, he will look up on the internet for an explanation on why nobody stopped his murderous maniacal mother until he was moments away from being murdered himself. And he will find the truth and draw his own conclusions, just like millions of other young men drew their own conclusions. When enough of them draw the conclusion that this whole thing is insane, and they do, that's when the trouble starts. We're now seeing only the early stages. If we're smart enough, we can avoid the later stages. But I suspect we won't be, because as I always say, people are not stupid, people are fucking stupid, and usually don't learn anything from history, or in the rare cases that they sort of do learn something from history, they only learn it the very hard way. Now, speaking of people being fucking stupid, this one is really insane, though unfortunately for everyone involved, entirely predictable. That's what you get when you try to bend over backwards to legally accommodate insane demands of the transgenderist lobby. Daily Mail, model 25 who became Britain's youngest transgender person at 15 claims she's a victim of transphobia after pornographer refused to have sex with her because she has a penis. Quote, a transgender woman says she's a victim of transphobic discrimination after being snubbed for a job as a female porn star because she still has a penis. Rhea Cooper, age 25, who became Britain's youngest trans person when she transitioned 10 years ago, had decided to embark on a career in porn when a photographer messaged her asking if she wants to have sex with him for a film. But when the photographer heard Rhea still had a penis, he refused to work with her, bluntly proclaiming he couldn't do so because she has a cock. Rhea has hit out at the transphobic behavior and said she's being unfairly discriminated against in her pursuit of a modeling career. Rhea from Hull, East Yorkshire, has reported the comments to Humberside Police, which is investigating the incident as a hate crime. The way he spoke to me after that was absolutely disgusting. No one should be discriminated against for their lifestyle choice. Humberside Police has confirmed officers are currently investigating the allegation. A spokesman for the force says, quote, we received a report of a hate incident yesterday on Wednesday, October the 16th. The report has been logged and will be investigated, close quote. Oh boy, this story is dynamite. That's why I included it in this video, so you can keep the link and use it whenever you're arguing with leftists, because it doesn't matter what the lefty answers to this. No matter what they say, they're wrong. I mean, if they side with this Rhea fellow, then that means they support rape, because they deny the photographer's right to say no to any sexual encounter. If they side, however, with the photographer, then that means they don't believe Rhea is a woman, which, as we all know, is absolutely haram and therefore a hate crime. But there's also an interesting nugget in the story that is easy to overlook. This Ria fellow claims he is being discriminated against for his lifestyle choice. So which is it? Being transgender is something innate into individuals, or is it a lifestyle choice? Because as things stand now, the claim by the transgenderist lobby is a metaphysical one. They quite literally claim that some men have women's souls and vice versa. And then this guy comes along and says it's a lifestyle choice. Now, sure, many will say that he meant his career in modeling as being a lifestyle choice, but that's not clear at all from the story or his other posts on social media. Besides, why is this being taken seriously by the police? Because that's where the biggest insanity lies, really. It's one thing when an individual believes he's entitled to sex with people who don't consent, but it's a whole different thing when that delusion is taken seriously by an institutional apparatus that can arrest and lock people up. This is terrible. You know what else is terrible? Taking children seriously. NBC News, Kansas 13-year-old girl who pointed finger gun at classmates charged with a felony. A Kansas middle school girl who formed her fingers into a gun and pointed it at several of her classmates after another student asked her who she would kill was arrested and charged with a felony. Terrible formulation by NBC. The incident happened on September the 18th at Westridge Middle School in Overland Park, about 13 miles south of Kansas City. After administrators were alerted to a potential threat made by a 13-year-old student, police said in a news release. According to the Kansas City Star, the girl was having a discussion with a classmate who asked if she could kill 5 people in the room. Who would they be? The girl responded by allegedly making a finger gun and pointing it at 4 students and then pointing it at herself, the outlet report. An Overland Park police spokesperson told NBC News in a statement Friday that an individual who felt threatened used the school's online anti-bullying app to alert administrators, who conducted an investigation and then told the school resource officer. The resource officers, who is employed by the city's police department, interviewed both students involved who affirmed the actions which constituted the potential threat, the police said. The girl, whose identity is not being released because she's a juvenile, was then arrested by the resource officer. Too often there are reports of violence in schools and inevitably questions about what could or should have been done to prevent the tragedy. Threats in schools are taken very seriously and treated appropriately, police said in the release. No, there aren't. A spokesperson for the Johnson County District Attorney's Office said after reviewing the evidence, the girl was charged with criminal threat, which is a felony offense. You're all insane. She's due to appear in court next week. John Kavanaugh, the girl's grandfather, told the Kansas City Star that he thinks the incident got completely out of hand and should have been handled in the principal's office and not with the teenager being charged with a felony. Kavanaugh said the 13-year-old does not have access to a gun. She was just mouthing off. He said, "I'm really worried about my granddaughter's future." Well, you shouldn't have sent her to a public school if you're really that worried. A spokesperson for the Shawnee Mission School District told NBC News that he could not discuss the incident, but that the district was not involved in the girls being arrested. We didn't have any control over that action, David Smith said, declining to say if the school disciplined the student who began the discussion by asking the girl who she would kill. Close quote. Now, I did look up for updates on this story and couldn't find any, so as far as we know, this could still be an ongoing issue. That is to say, the girl might still be in jail in preventative arrest, essentially. But the very fact that this was handled the way it was points, in my opinion, to systemic institutional insanity. As I said 4 years ago in my video, most of my childhood would now be illegal. The way children are being treated today is not just ridiculous, but insane. Under these rules, 100% of my generation, yours truly included, would have never gone past the 6th grade. I mean, For crying out loud, we would watch VHS cassettes with movies imported illegally at night, and then the next day we'd try to imitate some of that on the playground. For those who don't know what I mean, look up the documentary Chuck Norris vs. Communism, produced by HBO. It's available on Netflix too. Watch that to get an idea on what I'm talking about. But back to the case. It is astonishing, at least to me, how grown-up men and women can seriously come and say with a straight face that a 13-year-old girl with a hand gesture committed actions that constitute a potential threat warranting the arrest of the child and put in the same place with serious criminals. Besides, don't these jackasses know that the best school of crime is the prison? Congratulations! You might have actually been able to turn this girl into a legit criminal. This is what I mean when I say Generation Snowflake. Even if you think the whole so-called anti-bullying services, even if you think all of those are a good thing in theory, I don't, but even if you do, the fact of the matter is that in practice they always end up in ridiculous abuses like this one, which serve exactly nobody. What will be the lesson for the supposed victims of this girl? That they can they can always throw a tantrum which will result in the physical removal of anyone who mildly inconveniences them? What kind of responsible adult would that grow into? Because make no mistake, kids have always been very mean to each other and will always be very mean to each other. That's why they're kids. The question is, how do you address that? I may not have the full answer, nor do I purport to have the full answer. But using the criminal justice system for any mild inconvenience sounds to me like being the very wrong way to go about it. And since we're at the topic of educators grossly overstepping their bounds and, projecting their own insecurities upon children, here's another one. Yahoo News: 5th grade teachers ban dating to reduce broken hearts. I'm sorry, what? Dating? In the 5th grade? You gotta be kidding me. Quote, teachers at an Indiana elementary school raised some eyebrows and possibly broke some hearts when they sent a letter to parents of 5th grade students that included an interesting new rule: no dating allowed. 5th graders at Riverside Elementary School in Jeffersonville, Indiana, were given Tuesday and Wednesday to make sure that relationships have ended, according to a note sent home Wednesday to parents and guardians of students. The note from the 3 5th grade teachers at Riverside Elementary said that while students are at an age in which they become interested and develop crushes, it is also the age that hearts can get broken quickly. At this age, children are dating and breaking up within days of each other. This leads to many broken hearts, which carry over into the classroom, the teachers wrote. To combat students having broken hearts, we have implemented a zero dating policy. We're still encouraging our 5th graders to have many friends and develop strong friendships. Again, we are encouraging strong friendships, the teachers added. Students can still play together at recess, be in groups during classroom activities, and many other situations. We're truly just attempting to lessen the amount of broken hearts, they wrote. Parents and their students were asked to review the note together and sign and return it, but Brianna Bauer said she has no plans to do that. Bauer said her 10-year-old son Aiden has had a girlfriend since last year. Aiden came home from school furious on Tuesday after teachers told their students about the new policy. Bauer wrote on Wednesday in a Facebook post that it included a photo of the note. Bauer said she wants people to know this isn't a debate on whether 5th graders should date or not. I just think it's my right as a parent to let my child know if they're allowed to have a boyfriend or girlfriend, no matter their age. It's also my job as a parent to teach my child how to deal with heartbreak. It's just a part of life and not something we can avoid. I understand the teachers felt like they were helping, but they crossed the boundary, telling the students that they had to end all relationships by their given date. Bauer said her son and his girlfriend don't hold hands at school or display any romantic intimacy as part of their relationships. Rather, she said they are like best friends with a title. It means something to them. Erin Bohorquez, a spokeswoman for Greater Clark County Schools, responded in an email that the content of the letter was taken out of context and that there is not a zero-tolerance policy. Now, that's nonsense. The context is pretty clear. The intentions of the teachers was to protect student feelings, encourage developmentally appropriate friendships, and most importantly, protect instructional time, Bohorquez said. Teachers were trying to minimize disruptions to the school day. Bohorquez said no dating rules don't apply to other schools in the district. Bohorquez did not reply when asked if there are specific plans on how to enforce the policy at Riverside Elementary School. Close quote. Now, the sad part is that this isn't exactly new. I remember when I was doing the weekly podcast for A Voice for Men, reading about schools who tried to enforce a ban on best friends amongst even younger kids in order to encourage equality and avoid discrimination. Or some shit like that, and I wish I were joking. This isn't in a vacuum. This is something that's been growing for the last 10 years. More and more educators take it upon themselves to decide things that are simply none of their goddamn business. Nobody asked for their help or input, but they try it anyway. And this isn't by accident either, as I will show in the next story. Most of these educators have been intentionally trained that way. And since most teachers, especially in public schools, are dumber than a rock, they don't exercise too much critical thinking either, and just simply dogmatically apply what they have been taught. And the trend will not get better unless parents get to act proactively rather than react whenever insanity manifests itself. How to act proactively? Well, for starters, don't put your kid through public school. If that's not an option, let's not forget that in Europe it is illegal in some countries not to put your kid through this madness, then be engaged. Make it clear before insanity happens that you, as a parent, will be a terrible nuisance until sanity is restored. Yes, that means you will be that parent. But that's okay, because the alternative is to allow your kid to be bullied by insane quote-unquote educators, or even worse, it would mean to have your kid being taught things that they perhaps shouldn't be taught in schools, and not at such an early age. Like in the next story, Daily Mail, children as young as 6 are to be given compulsory self-touching lessons that critics say are sexualizing youngsters. Now, remember, about 3.5 years ago, when I told you that there will be, for sure, masturbation classes for prepubescent children, you all thought I was joking or exaggerating. Well, I wasn't. This is an insane story that gives a lot of pedo vibes, I'm telling you. Quote, children as young as 6 are being taught about touching or stimulating their own genitals as part of classes that will become compulsory in hundreds of primary schools. Some parents believe the lessons, part of a controversial new sex and relationship teaching program called All About Me, are sexualizing their young children. One couple told last night how they were so disturbed they withdrew their sons from lessons at a school where the program is already being taught. All About Me is being rolled out across 241 primaries by Warwickshire County Council and could be adopted by other local authorities next year as part of the government's overhaul of relationship and sex education. Family campaigners and religious groups warned that vague guidelines issued by the Department for Education meant schools could soon be providing sexual material to young children that many parents would consider inappropriate. Even politicians who had supported the RSE legislation expressed concern. Tory MP David Davis said, quote, I and many other parents would be furious at completely inappropriate sexual matters being taught to children as young as 6. These classes go way beyond the guidance the government is producing and are effectively sexualizing very young children, unquote. Documents obtained by the Mail on Sunday detail how All About Me classes involve pupils aged between 6 and 10 being told by teachers that there are rules about touching yourself. An explanation of rules about self-stimulation appears on the scheme's Year 2 lesson planned for 6 and 7-year-olds. Under a section called Touching Myself, teachers are advised to tell children that lots of people like to tickle or stroke themselves as it might feel nice. They are also instructed to inform youngsters that this may include touching their private parts and that while some people may say this behavior is dirty, it is in fact very normal. However, the youngsters are warned that it is not polite to touch themselves in public. It is an activity they should do when alone in the bath, shower, or in bed. In the same lesson, children are given scenarios which they must judge to be okay or not okay. In one of the scenarios, pupils are told that when a girl called Autumn has a bath and she's alone, she likes to touch herself between her legs because it feels nice. At this point, teachers are advised to remind the students of the rules about self-stimulation. The guidance on touching is repeated in lesson plans for years 4 and 5, involving pupils aged 8 to 10. As part of the government's RSE reforms, all primary schools will be required to teach compulsory relationship education for next September. It includes topics about families, friendships, online relationships, privacy, and being safe. Sex education tailored to the needs of their pupils is also recommended, but not mandatory, not yet what they mean. Warwickshire has introduced relationship lessons in some primaries ahead of the nationwide launch, including sessions addressing self-stimulation. From next September, parents will not be able to withdraw children from these lessons. Parents at Cotton End Primary School in Warwick met sex education consultant Joni Hunt, one of the architects of the All About Me scheme, in June and raised concern about some of its content. Asked why self-stimulation appeared in the Year 5 lesson plans and why it was not in the non-compulsory sex education element of the program, he said, well, actually, we refer to self-stimulation or self-soothing throughout the program in earlier years as well. This is not sex education, but actually information around safe and appropriate touching. However uncomfortable adults may find it, children of all ages will self-stimulate from time to time. They may do this when anxious or simply because it feels nice, unquote. Naomi and Matthew Seymour, whose 2 sons attend Cotton End, strongly disagree with that assessment. Concerned their sons would be exposed to issues they were not ready to hear, they removed them from school for the week during which the program was taught. My wife cried the first time she read what was going to be in the lesson, said Mr. Seymour, aged 38. This sexualization of our children is just totally inappropriate. They're calling it self-touching and they won't use the term masturbation, but when you read it, that's exactly what they're talking about. We don't want to start picket lines and wave banners. We're just an ordinary family. I think many families who have seen these lesson plans would feel the same way we did. Lynette Smith, a teacher who runs a company which provides RSE programs for schools, said she sympathized with those concerned by the self-stimulation section of the Year 2 curriculum. She said, we never use the word self-stimulation, not in primary school. For us, it is not appropriate. Pierce Shepherd of the Family Education Trust said RSE guidance was too vague. He added, it is even more concerning that parents may be denied the opportunity to withdraw their children from these lessons if the school brands them as relationship education classes rather than as sex education. Simon Calvert of the Christian Institute said, quote, it looks like Warwickshire has paid more attention to a controversial sex education consultancy than to what parents understand to be in the best interest of their children. Warwickshire County Council said the lessons were tailored to the age and development level of the children, adding that, quote, while some of the material may be sensitive for some, we believe it is important for children to get clear and consistent information about this important but often overlooked subject, close quote. Well, here we are. and it will only get worse, progressively more insane, largely because of low energy responses like those quoted in the article, not just from organizations but also from the parents themselves. Oh, we don't want to start picket lines and wave banners, we're just an ordinary family. Well, tough luck then. Because if you don't want to defend the innocence of your child, then who exactly should? Because this is the crux of the matter. Most of this lunacy is possible solely because parents have agreed to entirely outsource the bringing up of their own children to the state. This was not done by force, mind you, well, except for Germany, but as usual in matters of education, Germany is a special case. But this was done largely peacefully, by persuading the parents that their fucking careers are more important than raising their children. And as usual in all matters, the dumb party is not the one making the unreasonable request, but the one accepting it. Parents have consistently accepted this, and of course the state kept on asking for more because why not? And don't think this lunacy doesn't come to your school, if it's not already there. Go back to my video back in 2016 on this topic, and there I quoted examples from Europe going back to the late 1990s. In fact, this one from Britain was imported from the Netherlands, which already has most of this nonsense. And if you're a parent and you're unwilling to do something about it, then that means you agree and you take the responsibility that in the future your children might end up resenting you. Sure, some might not, but as a rule, offspring eventually gets to the point of judging his or her upbringing. And the judgment is pretty harsh. And once your kid finds out that you could have done something about it but chose not to because you didn't want to rock the boat or you were chasing a meaningless promotion at your job, well, that's when the judgment comes. Besides, in the British law, causing or inciting a child under 13 to engage in sexual activity is a crime in and of itself under the Sexual Offences Act of 2002 or 2003, I forget the year, but it doesn't really matter. What does matter is that you can't rely on the courts. The law is for teenagers, especially teenage boys, to be locked up at will based on feminist-inspired whims. It's not for protecting real-life children from real-life harm that comes with early sexualization. That is the assumption you should start from. Now, I have quite a few more insane stories, so I guess I'll have to make a third episode. But until then, let's see. Come on, we can squeeze one more here, can we? Yeah, this one should fit. CBS San Francisco. Mural in downtown San Francisco depicts Swedish teen climate activist Greta Thunberg. The newest addition to the San Francisco skyline is a work of art, a mural depicting Swedish teenager Greta Thunberg designed to draw attention to climate change. Anders Kobre Petreselli, an internationally renowned artist, is painting the activist teen with big blue eyes and a Mona Lisa smile. The mural is still work in progress, as Kobre is spending his days hoisted high up on a platform about 10 stories above Mason Street on the side of the Native Sons building near Union Square. Thunberg is the 16-year-old from Sweden who has inspired young people all over the world to take to the streets and let older people know they want climate change to be taken seriously. What I want from people is to realize have to do something for the world, Cobra says. Probably he meant they have to. Anyway, otherwise it's going to be the beginning of our extinction. No, it won't. Kobre says his paintings often provoke strong reactions. He painted the Robin Williams mural on Market Street that has recently been demolished to make way for some high-rise apartments. But this work of art, he said, is different. This one is more political because I want them to think about it, he said. What's the message behind it? Maybe to create a conversation with friends. Have you seen the mural of Greta? What is it about? It's about climate change. Kobre is donating his time for the cause. The environmental non-profit One Atmosphere is buying the paint, close quote. And that's totally not a cult. Yep, totally. Cross my heart and swear to. Yep, of course, no cult. And yeah, he's donating his time, except he's getting a huge check from probably very likely Soros-backed NGO, let's put it this way. What's interesting is that after all of this, there is still a strong denial of the existence of a religious left. Even leftists who are proponents of a religious left, like the New York Times columnist Bianca Vivian Brooks, I think is her name. Anyway, she outright proposes a religious left, supposedly in order to take on the so-called religious right. But, you know, even those people deny that there is already here. But in reality, the religious left is already here and has been for quite some time. The dogmatic belief in anthropogenic climate change is a religious one in nature. All of the identity politics crap is very religious in nature, similar with Islam, as a matter of fact. You have white people as the Dar al-Harb and non-white people as Dar al-Islam, or the House of Peace. The belief that men can be women if they say so is inherently a metaphysical claim akin to religious belief. Most of feminism is a religion as well. So yeah, murals of cult-like figures is also religious behavior in and of itself. The question is, when will there be enough people to recognize it as such and start treating it as such? Because just like it's good to have separation between church and state, it is at the very least equally good, if not superior, to have a strong separation between the left and the state. Nothing good can come out of a theocracy based on a religion, leftism, that did not pass the test of time. In fact, this could be good for leftism too. It would compel its parishioners to start honestly look inwards and evaluate their ideas as what they are, a religion, instead of continuing to live in the fantasy land that their ideas are inherently correct just because they don't have crosses and their evangelicals have blue check marks on Twitter. It's madness. But then again, if they acknowledge leftism for what it is, then they'd suddenly realize that they really are no better than the angry man screaming at the street corner that the end is nigh. And that could be devastating for their ideas, because suddenly they'd have to get off their high horse all the way down to the level of the people they love to despise. And that can be pretty shocking. But on the upside, it would do wonders to their mental health. I'm just saying. Anyway, enough insanity for now, but I will be back with the third episode very soon, because I still have a huge pile of links and I'd like to emphasize as many of them as possible, not just for your own entertainment, although that is part of the reason too, but also for your own library so you can use it in your own debates. I mean, it's working, or even though it may not seem that way, but the narrative has been shifting quite greatly over the last 4 years, and it's one of the reasons why I keep on doing this. So, with all of that being said, thank you all for watching. Thank you for your continuous and generous financial support. Don't forget to subscribe, visit our website, consider a donation should you derive any value from the work being done here, and yeah, I will see you all soon on the Freedom Alternative.